Chapter 86. As Zeke returned to the waiting room, Farrell exclaimed excitedly, "Sir Zeke. The semifinals. Just 2 more wins and you'll be the champion." Zeke nodded at Farrell's words. "It's all thanks to you, Sir Farrell." Smiling, Zeke looked at Felix and Liam, who were slumped next to him. "Why are you both acting like that?" He understood why Liam was gloomy after losing to Reina, but he couldn't understand why Felix, who had advanced to the semifinals, was also acting that way. Felix looked up at Zeke and said, "Ugh, Master, my next opponent is Ellen Sabrina. How can I fight someone who is almost on par with the Master?" Felix groaned about having to face Ellen. Zeke smacked Felix hard on the back. "Ouch. Master, your hand seems to be getting spicier day by day." Zeke clicked his tongue and said to Felix, "Go and show them all your skills. If you do it half-heartedly, it's closed-door training for you." Felix jumped at Zeke's words. "No. Senior Liam lost, but you're not making him do closed-door training. You're only making me do it. Master, aren't you being too biased?" Felix, who received another smack on the back instead of an answer from Zeke, writhed in pain. After the designated break time, Zeke and Felix went back to the arena. The semifinals were about to begin. The first match of the semifinals was between Zeke and Reina. Zeke and Reina faced each other in the arena, swords in hand. The cheers were tremendous as the two entered the arena. The standard bearers of the Turin family beat a huge drum and cheered for Reina. In response, the Agamemnon and Graham families frantically waved their clan banners, praying for Zeke's victory. Zeke looked at Reina and said, "It's the first time since we faced each other in the cradle evaluation." Zeke had surpassed Reina many times over since then, the continent's youngest Blue Knight and the youngest graduate of Valhalla. Reina silently gripped her sword and pointed it at Zeke. Zeke also drew Bahamut and pointed it at Reina as soon as the match started. Reina charged towards Zeke. Whoosh. Using her tremendous elasticity, Reina swung her sword at Zeke like a flash of lightning. Clang. Reina's sword and Zeke's sword clashed, sparks flying. Ha! Reina unleashed a fierce attack on Zeke, exuding tremendous spirit. Even without using aura, the force of each sword strike was enough to shake the surrounding air. Zeke calmly parried Reina's sword and defended firmly. He deflected her powerful downward strikes, sometimes softly, sometimes strongly, and counterattacked whenever he saw an opening. Whoosh. As Zeke's sword flew towards her side, Reina jumped back and retreated. Zeke didn't miss the opportunity. Dragon Slayer art applied form Gale Force Atmosphere Splitter. Zeke's Gale Force unfolded towards Reina. Reina gritted her teeth and also unleashed an applied form Turin-style Dragon Slayer art counter skill Bullhorn Breaker. After deflecting Zeke's Atmosphere Splitter with all her might using a two-handed sword technique, Reina rotated her body and immediately swung her sword towards Zeke. It was an application of the Dragon Slayer art, mimicking the counterattack of deflecting a charging bull's horns and immediately digging inside to pierce the bull's heart. Zeke's body momentarily flickered at Reina's powerful counterattack. Gale Force Phantom Step Shape-Shifting. It was an upgraded version of the high-speed movement skill he had acquired before. As shape-shifting unfolded, Zeke's figure disappeared, leaving only an afterimage, and Reina's sword cut through empty air. Where? Even as Reina looked around, Zeke was nowhere to be seen. At that moment, Zeke's shadow loomed over her. Reina hurriedly raised her sword to block Zeke's attack. Crash. However, Zeke didn't strike Reina with his sword and simply descended. As a result, Reina's sword, raised above her head, stopped in midair. Zeke, crouching low to the ground, exploited her opening, lowering his stance. He pointed Bahamut at Reina's exposed neck. It was a complete defeat for Reina. Zeke Draker wins. Reina failed to surpass Zeke once again. She lowered her sword, looked at Zeke, and said, "Next time, I will definitely not lose." She sheathed her sword and walked down from the arena with dignity. Zeke grinned as he watched Reina. "Just like the Flash Knight, perhaps she'll become even stronger than in my past life." Amidst thunderous applause, Zeke descended from the arena and soon the next match began. Felix went up to the arena with a mournful expression. Helen was looking not at Felix, but at Zeke, who was sitting in the waiting area behind him. Seeing Helen's gaze directed at him, Zeke inwardly chuckled. "Now's not the time to be looking at me." Despite always nagging Felix, his potential was extraordinary. If he could use aura, it would be difficult for him to last more than 10 seconds against Helen, but with only swordsmanship, an unexpected result could occur. Felix Valencia. Ellen Sabrina. The two pointed their swords at each other and prepared for the duel. The gong signaling the start of the match rang out. That was when it happened. Surprisingly, Felix was the first to charge towards Helen. Whoosh. Helen, who hadn't paid much attention to Felix's skills, was taken aback by the sudden sharp sword strike and hurriedly swung her sword. Clang. Helen was surprised by the unexpectedly heavy blow. Felix's swordsmanship, which she had seen in the previous quarterfinal match, was fundamentally sound. However, she had thought he wouldn't be able to use it properly against her. But after actually clashing swords with him, her thoughts changed. If that had landed properly, my wrist might have been injured. She had only been thinking about her match with Zeke and assumed she would easily defeat Felix. Helen corrected her posture after the unexpectedly strong attack. At the same time, Helen's atmosphere changed, seeing Helen's stance. Reminiscent of a solid steel wall, Felix also pulled his sword towards his chest and regulated his breathing. Both Felix and Helen were skilled in orthodox swordsmanship, so their balance between offense and defense was excellent this time. Helen was the first to strike. Whoosh. A heavy sword strike flew low towards Felix's lower body. Felix, without breaking his basic stance, shifted his position clockwise, dodging Helen's attack, and charged forward, swinging his sword. As expected, it was a clean movement. Like something out of a textbook, Zeke could sense traces of the Agamemnon golden swordsmanship in Felix's swordsmanship. He may have complained, but he properly absorbed the elder's techniques. Helen regained her stance and parried Felix's sword strike. Both Felix and Helen's wrists throbbed from the intense impact. Huff. Felix caught his breath and regained his stance. Helen frowned as she saw Felix's stance, which was as solid as her own defense. Now I understand a little how my opponents must have felt. A sharp counterattack was hidden within the seemingly monotonous defense. If she recklessly charged in, her attack was likely to be blocked, and she would be vulnerable to a counterattack. If she could use aura, she could break through that defense with her steel technique. But it seemed difficult with only swordsmanship. Helen also held her sword and regulated her breathing. I myself shall become a strong steel sword that pierces through walls. Zeke, who was watching this, was surprised. Helen Draco is already aiming for the realm of sword-body unity? Becoming one with the sword meant opening the gateway to ascend from Blue Knight to Red Knight. Helen tried to break through Felix's defense by becoming a steel sword herself. Her body shot forward in an instant. Whoosh. It was as if a giant sword was flying towards Felix. Felix concentrated and extended his sword towards Helen. Agamemnon golden swordsmanship counter-skill rainbow reflection. It was the most powerful counter-skill he had learned from the elders of the Agamemnon clan, seeing Felix's sword deflecting her own and pushing through. Helen gritted her teeth and unleashed a counter-skill Dragon Slayer art, applied form steel technique armor overturn clang. A counter to a counter, cough. There was no time to control his strength. In the end, Helen's sword struck Felix's side. Felix collapsed, bleeding, still gripping his sword. The paramedics outside the arena quickly rushed up. They immediately poured the potion they were carrying onto Felix's wound. Sizzle. Thanks to the highly effective potion, the wound inflicted by Helen's sword quickly foamed and healed. Helen felt her hand holding the sword trembling as she looked at the fallen Felix. If I had made even a small mistake, I would have been the one who fell. That's how sharp Felix's counterattack was. Felix was soon carried out by the paramedics, and Helen became the victor of the semi-final match. Even though the match was over, the arena was filled with cheers calling out Ellen and Felix's names. Ellen, Ellen, Felix, Felix. The audience was moved by the incredible match the two had shown. Gareth stepped onto the heated arena. He shouted towards the audience, "The final match of the Draker Martial Arts Tournament will be held next week at the Grand Stadium." The Grand Stadium, which hosted the final match of the Draker Martial Arts Tournament every year, was filled with not only key figures from the Draker Blood Alliance clans, but also thousands of spectators. Gareth pointed at Zeke and Helen and called them up to the arena. He pointed at Zeke first. Zeke Draker. As soon as he called out his name, cheers erupted from the families supporting Zeke. Then, Gareth pointed at Helen. Ellen Sab. At that moment, she raised her hand and stopped Gareth from speaking. She stepped forward and shouted to the audience in the arena. "My name is not Ellen Sabrina." The audience began to stir at her sudden words. She spoke again. "My name is Helen Draker. I am one of the pure-blooded awakened of the Draker clan, a member of the direct bloodline, and one of the Blue Knights of Draker. One of the spectators stood up and shouted, Helen Draker, the Steel Knight. Oh my God. You mean the Steel Knight who wiped out all the outlaws in the Central Region? The Steel Knight, famous for not revealing her face, appeared in the martial arts tournament. The audience buzzed with excitement at the appearance of Helen Drake. She drew her sword and shouted, I, Helen Draker, will put all my effort into the duel with Zeke Draker in the Draker martial arts tournament. To this end, I ask that you reconsider the rule prohibiting the use of aura in the final match. The audience cheered at Helen Draker's words. It didn't make sense to prohibit aura in a duel between two pure-blooded Drakers who shook the continent. Zeke inwardly admired Helen as he looked at her. Huh, I thought she was just a rigid practitioner, but I didn't know the Steel Knight had this side to her. After Callie died in his past life, Helen was the one who succeeded her. She had the qualities of a politician hidden within her, which even she herself didn't know. The audience shouted at Gareth, Allow aura! Allow aura! Give the aura prohibition to the monsters. As the atmosphere heated up, an urgent meeting was held by the organizers of the martial arts tournament. The rule was created to give Edward Siemens an advantage, and since he was eliminated, there was no need to maintain the aura prohibition rule. The committee decided to follow public opinion. Gareth, receiving the news from the committee, nodded and made an announcement. The use of aura will be allowed in the final match. The audience erupted in cheers. Zeke and Helen exchanged sharp glances. It won't be easy. I'm looking forward to it. The semi-finals ended with the audience's fervent enthusiasm, and there were those who quietly watched all this from the corner of the arena. So, who do you think will win, Arthur? Duke asked Arthur Draker, who was deeply buried in his robe. Arthur rose from his seat and said, It doesn't matter who wins. Only the one who wins matters. Duke clicked his tongue as he watched Arthur walk away. The corners of his mouth are twitching. He's happy as can be, but he's putting on an act. Duke grinned as he looked at Zeke in the arena and then followed Arthur. Chapter 87. The Grand Stadium, one of the landmarks symbolizing Atlas. Thousands of people flocked to this place. They were spectators who came to see the final match of the Draker martial arts tournament. This final match, in particular, attracted attention from all over the continent, as it was a duel between pure-blooded awakened Drakers and those who had achieved the rank of Blue Knight. Arthur Draker, the head of the Draker clan, appeared in the stadium filled with thousands of spectators. He shouted to the audience, We will now begin the final match of the Draker martial arts tournament. Tremendous cheers erupted and brilliant lights illuminated the arena at the same time. Zeke Draker and Helen Draker entered the arena. Zeke wore light armor while Helen wore heavier-looking armor. What was unusual was Helen's sword. She was carrying a long, massive sword on her back. The audience murmured as they saw Helen's armament. Is that the famous Dragon Buster of the Steel Knight? The promotion gift Helen received from the head of the clan when she became a Blue Knight was the Dragon Buster, made from dragon bone from the blade to the hilt. It was shaped more like a Japanese sword than a typical Western sword. Heavy armor and a sword as massive as an adult's body, it was no wonder her title was Steel Knight. Arthur Draker descended from the arena and Zeke and Helen faced each other. Zeke drew Bahamut and Helen drew the Dragon Buster. The tension between the two was palpable, even reaching the audience. Soon, the gong signaling the start of the match rang out. Clang. Simultaneously, Zeke and Helen swung their swords. Crash. Instead of the sound of swords clashing, it sounded like an explosion. Zeke and Helen gritted their teeth, their swords locked, and glared at each other. Crack. The floor of the arena cracked from the sheer force of their struggle. Clang. A moment later, they both deflected each other's swords and jumped back. Zeke tightly gripped Bahamut and assumed the starting stance of the dragon-slaying art. Dragon-slaying art, true dragon sword, art half-moon / a half-moon-shaped aura flew from Zeke's sword. Helen held the Dragon Buster vertically and met the half-moon attack head-on. Crash. The half-moon Zeke launched was neutralized. It seemed the Dragon Buster served not only as a sword but also as a shield. As expected, her defense is solid. Zeke changed his stance and unleashed Gale Force technique, Dragon Slaying Art, applied form Gale Force technique, wind control. Zeke started circling Helen at high speed, combined with the Phantom Step. It looked as if multiple Zekes were surrounding Helen. Helen closed her eyes, holding the Dragon Buster, then she held the Dragon Buster horizontally and shouted, "Ha!" There was no technique or anything, she simply swung the Dragon Buster and cut through Zeke's afterimages. Crash. The surroundings were instantly devastated. Whoosh. At that moment, Zeke leaped onto the Dragon Buster and dashed towards Helen. Swish. Zeke swung his sword at Helen. Helen let go of the Dragon Buster, drew the arming sword she was wearing at her waist, and blocked Zeke's attack. Clang. After blocking Zeke's attack, Helen lowered her stance, picked up the Dragon Buster again, and swung it. Whoosh. A strange sound echoed as the Dragon Buster tore through the air with its power. Screech. Zeke leaped into the air and dodged the Dragon Buster's attack as the two faced each other from a distance. The audience, who had been holding their breath, finally erupted in cheers. Zeke. Zeke. Helen. Helen. From the Agamemnon clan, Rufus Agamemnon, the clan elders, and even the head maid came to cheer for Zeke, the true successor of Agamemnon. Zeke Draker? Zeke pointed Bahamut at Helen. Her defense is solid, I need to shake her up a bit. Zeke's stance changed. He took the stance of the Agamemnon golden swordsmanship instead of the dragon slaying art. The Agamemnon clan, recognizing this, waved their banners even more vigorously in support. Zeke charged towards Helen with his sword raised. Whoosh. As Zeke thrust forward like a lance, Helen tried to block his attack by holding the Dragon Buster to the side. Whoosh. But Zeke suddenly changed direction mid-charge. He shifted his stance and launched a high kick towards Helen's head. Bang. Helen barely managed to turn her body and avoid the kick, but the shoulder plate of her armor was sent flying. A knight's body, strengthened by aura, was no different from a weapon. Even a kick could inflict a fatal wound. Helen caught her breath, disrupted by Zeke's unorthodox attack. Zeke, you're truly strong. She hadn't expected to be pushed back this much by her younger brother. After catching her breath, she gripped the Dragon Buster and gathered her strength. Wung. A clear aura rose from Helen's body. The aura enveloped the Dragon Buster, and soon an aura blade was formed. Seeing this, Zeke also activated an aura blade on Bahamut. The two, having created clear, blue aura blades, simultaneously leaped into the air. Flash. Blue light filled the air of the arena. Wong. Clang. Flash. The aura blades clashed, creating a loud impact and shockwaves. The two, who had been engaged in aerial combat, landed back on the arena floor. Immediately, they charged towards each other and clashed swords again. Wong. Crash. A powerful vibration and shockwaves tore through the arena floor. Crash. Thanks to the defensive barrier installed around the audience, the shockwaves were neutralized and dispersed, but the audience could still feel the intensity of the clash. Zeke and Helen stood on the devastated arena floor, pointing their swords at each other. However, unlike Zeke, Helen was breathing heavily. Huff, huff. A prolonged battle against Zeke, who had infinite stamina, was meaningless. Helen also noticed that Zeke's stamina was far superior to hers. Unbelievable. But this was reality. Helen realized it was time to make her final gambit. She gripped the Dragon Buster and raised her energy. Wong. The Dragon Buster vibrated intensely. Zeke also noticed that Helen was about to make her final move. He also assumed the stance of the dragon slaying art. Wong. An immense tension filled the air between the two. That was when it happened. Helen raised the Dragon Buster high and swung it towards Zeke. Dragon slaying art, applied form steel technique. Wall splitter. Terrakin Draker, the founder of the Draker clan, was said to have split a giant wall in two with a single sword strike, as if replicating the legendary Terrakin Draker. A powerful energy surged towards Zeke like a tsunami, threatening to split the wall. Zeke took a stance towards Helen's wall splitter and swung his sword horizontally. True dragon sword art secret technique. Trijunction form great rock rising from the water. Whoosh. A massive energy in the shape of a bird emanated from Zeke's sword. The energy split Helen's steel technique, which was surging like a tsunami. As if it still had power left, the energy extended towards Helen, who was holding her sword. Crack. Ugh. Helen tried to block Zeke's true dragon sword art with the Dragon Buster, but Helen, already exhausted from using Wall Splitter, couldn't hold on any longer. That was when it happened. Wong. Zeke charged towards Helen with Bahamut raised. He leaped into the air and unleashed the Dragon Slaying Art. Dragon Slaying Art, True Dragon Sword Art. Dragon Scale thrust, the technique that pierced through all 10 iron plates, was unleashed towards Helen. Crash. The arena was devastated and a cloud of dust rose. The audience stood up in surprise. What happened? A moment later, the dust settled and the scene in the arena was revealed. Zeke was pointing his sword at the fallen Helen. It was Zeke Draco's victory. Clang. The gong signaling the end of the match rang out. At the same time, cheers erupted from the audience. Rufus, Agamemnon, and the elders shed tears of joy. Zeke extended his hand towards the fallen Helen. Helen took Zeke's hand and stood up. I lost. I was just lucky. Helen knew better than anyone that it wasn't just luck. She said to Zeke, Callie Draco said she has something to tell you, so she'll be looking for you soon. Leaving those words behind, Helen briefly greeted the audience and left the arena. The audience cheered for Helen, who, despite losing, had shown incredible skill. She had proven her strength worthy of the title Steel Knight, and the cheers were well-deserved. A moment later, Arthur Draker entered the arena. He stood next to Zeke and spoke to the audience. The winner of this year's Draker Martial Arts Tournament is Zeke Draker. The arena was filled with cheers and excitement. Arthur personally placed the winner's medal around Zeke's neck. He held Zeke's shoulder and said, You carried out the mission splendidly. I simply followed your orders, sir. Arthur chuckled at Zeke's words. Although he was the head of the Draker clan who held sway over the continent, he found it difficult to grasp his youngest son's inner thoughts. As Zeke always remained calm and unafraid of him, Arthur said to Zeke, There are various privileges for the winner of the Draker Martial Arts Tournament. I'll give them to you later, but as a father, I want to give a gift to my proud son. Is there anything you want? Zeke looked at Arthur and said without hesitation, I want to hear about my mother. Arthur's expression subtly changed at Zeke's words. Your mother? Did you hear something from the Agamemnon clan? I heard less than I didn't hear. That's why I want to hear it from you, sir. I'm curious why you want that out of all the many gifts you could have. Zeke looked at Arthur and replied, I want to know about the prophecy of my mother, who was an irregular. Arthur's expression hardened slightly at those words. After a moment of silence, Arthur nodded and said to Zeke, Laura often surprised me, just like you. There's rarely anything in life that hasn't gone my way, but Laura was the only one I could never control. He looked at Zeke and said, Come to Four Seasons Castle, there's something I want to show you. Zeke nodded at Arthur's words. Arthur smiled at Zeke and said, Hold up your medal and smile. That's the only way this tournament, which cost thousands of gold, will have meaning. Following Arthur's words, Zeke held up his medal and waved to the audience. The audience chanted Zeke's name and cheered. It was a warm gaze and response that he had never experienced in his previous life, so Zeke won in the end. Abel said to William while sipping his black tea. William said with a displeased expression that incompetent Edward only brought shame to the clan. William was greatly dissatisfied with Edward being knocked out by Zeke in one blow. Abel put down his teacup and said with a smile, He'll become stronger once he receives the baptism anyway, so why are you so dissatisfied? William shook his head. Edward, that guy is hopeless. I'd rather have the youngest, at least he knows how to use his head. Abel chuckled and said, By the way, how's the Guardian Knight matter going, William? William changed his expression and slowly spoke. It seems Callie Draco's side is continuing to persuade the elders. They're desperately trying to prevent you from receiving the Guardian Knight position. Can't we bring it to a vote now? We're still about 2 votes short. There are many elders who claim neutrality, so we need to secure 2 more votes to safely put you in the position. Abel tapped the table with his finger. 2 votes. William, I'm tired of waiting. You know how long I've waited for this moment. William nodded at Abel's words. William said to Abel, If only the Guardian Knight matter and the Karuz matter are resolved, things will go your way. Just be patient a little longer. Abel slowly rose from his seat. He looked at William with madness-filled eyes and said, I'm counting on it, but keep in mind, if the wait gets any longer, you'll have to be prepared as well. With those words, Abel entered the torture chamber. Soon, terrible screams leaked from the torture chamber, torture inflicted not to obtain information, but simply for pleasure. William broke out in a cold sweat as he heard the screams leaking from the torture chamber. The night of slaughter was becoming a terrifying monster that didn't belong in this world. Chapter 88. Congratulations on winning the martial arts tournament. Wherever Zeke went, the Knights of Four Seasons Castle greeted him. Their attitude was incredibly friendly, unlike what one would expect from the usually harsh Draker Knights when Zeke first received his official knighthood. There were quite a few within Four Seasons Castle who didn't approve of him. However, the atmosphere completely changed after the martial arts tournament. Thanks to this, Zeke could personally experience the authority of the Draker martial arts tournament. Receiving greetings from the knights. Zeke headed towards the Lord's office. At the door, the secretary welcomed Zeke warmly. "The Lord is waiting for you." Guided by the secretary, Zeke entered the office. As the secretary had said, Arthur Draker was waiting for him. "Zeke, come in." Once again, Arthur had prepared precious tea from the Eastern Empire. Zeke sat down and savored the aroma of the tea. Arthur looked at Zeke and said, "I thought you would enjoy the winner's banquet and come back months later. My prediction was completely off." Usually, when someone won the Draker martial arts tournament, they would hold a grand party with their sponsor clans and other related people. After that, it was customary to tour the entire continent, participate in parties hosted by invited clans, and enjoy immense popularity. However, Zeke didn't hold a separate banquet and didn't respond to invitations from other families. "I'm not really the type to enjoy parties." Arthur nodded at Zeke's words. "I was the same at your age. I only focused on rigorous training for faster growth and thought parties and banquets were just entertainment for those who lacked training." Putting down his teacup, Arthur continued, "But remember this, even if you become a Black Knight, you can't face the entire continent alone. If even 2 other Black Knights join forces, you won't be able to escape death." Zeke didn't expect to hear such words from Arthur Draker, one of the strongest individuals on the continent. Black Knights were called one-man armies, but even Black Knights had limits to their power. At that moment, Zeke suddenly thought of the hero King Kaiser. If it were King Kaiser, I don't think it would matter how many Black Knights there were. The power of Black Knight was close to that of a sword master during the Hero King era, but the Hero King was at the Grand Master realm, surpassing Sword Master. If I surpass Black Knight and become a Grand Master, he would become an absolute ruler who could look down on everything. Arthur looked at Zeke and said, "Well, my words probably won't reach your ears right now." Zeke raised his head, looked at Arthur, and said, "No, sir, I will engrave your words deep in my heart, that relationships with others are as important as individual strength." Arthur chuckled at Zeke's model answer and said, "Stop with the insincere flattery and come here." He rose from his seat and gestured to Zeke. Arthur took Zeke to an exhibition hall where he kept his personal belongings. Rare items Arthur had collected from each continent were displayed in glass cases. With his dragon eye, Zeke could see what each item was. Most of them are from before the Golden Age. They seem to be from the Hero King era. Arthur was collecting ancient artifacts like the Ram Emperor. Walking between the displays, Arthur stopped at one spot. It was in front of an old box. He slowly opened the box. An unexpected item was placed inside. A pocket watch? Arthur carefully took out the old pocket watch from the box. Then he looked at Zeke and said, "This is the only thing Laura left me." Zeke was surprised by Arthur's words. "Are you saying it's my mother's memento?" Arthur nodded. "Yes, Laura always carried this with her." Zeke looked at the expression in Arthur's eyes as he gazed at the pocket watch. The man of steel, who seemed devoid of emotion, was looking at the watch with a wistful gaze. After a moment, he turned his head, approached Zeke, and handed him the pocket watch. "Are you giving this to me? Didn't you say you wanted to know about Laura? This watch doesn't contain everything about your mother. Laura used this watch to peek into realms we couldn't see. She said she found it in the northern continent. I don't know much more than that. She was always a secretive person. Laura Agamemnon, an irregular with the talent of a healer." It seemed that even Arthur Draker, the head of the Draker clan, and her husband didn't know everything about her. Zeke, holding the watch, looked at Arthur and asked, "There's one thing I want to ask." "What is it?" Zeke clenched his fist. "Have you ever considered that I might have the talent of a healer?" Arthur closed his mouth for a moment at those words. Then he slowly answered, "Yes." Zeke's hand trembled slightly. Arthur looked at Zeke and slowly spoke, "But Zeke, you weren't a healer. You're a proud, pure-blooded awakened of the Draker clan." Zeke gritted his teeth at Arthur's words. "If I weren't a pure-blooded awakened, were you going to abandon me?" Zeke swallowed those words with difficulty. The moments of hardship he went through in his past life flashed through his mind. Arthur said to Zeke, "Zeke, I'll tell you one thing. Don't delve too deeply into your mother, Laura Agamemnon." Zeke raised his head at those words. "What do you mean?" "Laura was a healer, but she was also an irregular. You know what that means, right? In the central continent, irregulars were treated as cursed beings, so being born with the blood of an irregular wouldn't be advantageous for Zeke. There was a reason why Duke initially mistook Zeke for an irregular and then deliberately hid that fact." Zeke bowed his head to Arthur and replied, "I'll follow your orders, sir." Arthur placed his hand on Zeke's shoulder. "You are a proud, pure-blooded awakened of the Draker clan. Don't forget that." Zeke nodded and tightly gripped his mother's pocket watch. Returning to his mansion from Four Seasons Castle, Zeke went up to his room and examined the pocket watch. Why did mother leave this watch as her last memento? At that moment, Zeke suddenly felt that this watch was quite familiar. Where have I seen this before? As he pondered, a spark suddenly ignited in Zeke's mind: Saturn Draker. He remembered the time when Bahamut's memories awakened while he was learning the true dragon sword art. It matched the shape of the pocket watch that Saturn Draker was holding when he visited Bahamut, the ruler of Sunset. Recalling that memory, Zeke looked at the watch. I remember this watch clearly had the power of Kronos dwelling within it. His mother, Laura Agamemnon, used this watch to foresee the future, and in his memory, Saturn Draker used this watch to show Bahamut what would happen in the future. Could the power of Kronos be the power of prophecy? Zeke examined the watch's exterior, turning it over and over. There were no inscriptions or markings on the surface. However, despite being old, the surface was still smooth. Opening the lid and looking at the watch face, he saw a large clock in the center and smaller clocks densely packed around it. The hands of the clocks were stopped. Zeke looked at the watch and slowly activated his mana. Will this work too? The ancient Hersian and Agamemnon's golden mask had also awakened in response to mana. If this watch was also an ancient artifact, there was a high chance it would react to mana. Wong. Zeke infused mana into the watch. However, unlike Hersian and the mask, the watch showed no reaction. Is this not enough? At that moment, something occurred to Zeke. Among ancient artifacts, there were often those that reacted to the user's blood. Zeke took out a dagger, cut his finger, and let a few drops of blood fall onto the watch. Still, there was no reaction. So he tried channeling mana again. Wong. Suddenly, the blood Zeke dripped began to seep into the watch. At the same time, a message appeared before Zeke's eyes, detecting the soul of an elder dragon dwelling in the user's blood. The dormant state of the ancient artifact is being lifted. The S-Clock has been temporarily activated. The title, Blessed by the Ancient Dragon, unlocks the security of the S-Clock. The S-Clock is connected to the system. An authentication key is required to activate the S-Clock. You must enter the Temple of Kronos and renew the authentication key. Authentication key? At the same time, a window popped up before Zeke's eyes. Main quest mission: renew the authentication key and activate the S-Clock. No time limit. Quest mission reward: granting the power of Kronos. The power of Kronos, you say? Zeke knew the power of the dragon control, which was Bahamut's power. Kronos, the contracted dragon of the Hero King, must have power as strong as Bahamut's. Zeke opened the map to check the location of the authentication key renewal mentioned in the quest. This is? The renewal location was none other than Aten, located in the eastern part of the northern continent. Aten of all places. The reason for his uneasy reaction was that Aten was the territory of the Nirvana clan, one of the three transcendent clans. If the Drakers controlled Midland and Ishtar exerted influence over the southern border and desert regions, Nirvana held great influence over Aten and the stormy seas. Well, it's not a place I can't go. There are many things to collect there, and I'll renew the authentication key while I'm at it. In his past life, Zeke had been active in the northern continent longer than the central continent, so he remembered various treasures and opportunities hidden there. He recalled the hidden dungeon of the Archmage in Aten. It will take some time before that place is discovered. He had to be even more diligent, as he had to find not only the seal of Kronos but also the authentication key for the watch. Zeke carefully stored the pocket watch in his inventory. Just then, Decker entered the room. "Young master, you have a visitor. If it's another banquet invitation, just send them away." Decker shook his head. "Callie Draker and Helen Draker are here. My sisters." Zeke rose from his seat and went to the drawing room. Unlike before, Callie and Helen were sitting on the sofa in casual clothes. Zeke approached and greeted them. "Welcome. I didn't expect you both to come in person." Callie smiled and said, "It's fine. We can't just summon the busy winner of the martial arts tournament whenever we want." Zeke smiled back and sat across from them. Callie then said to Zeke, "As you might have expected, Helen is on our side. She participated in the martial arts tournament because she wanted to test your skills herself." Zeke nodded at Callie's words and said to Helen, "Thank you for your consideration, Lady Helen. If you had used your bloodline ability, I would have surely lost." Helen flinched at Zeke's words. "You even know about my bloodline ability. Zeke, you're starting to scare me. Zeke grinned and said, please consider it a personal interest in the Steel Knight. Callie, who was watching the conversation between the two siblings with a warm smile, continued, the reason we came here is because of the current situation in Four Seasons Castle. Zeke nodded as he listened to Callie's words. You're talking about keeping Abel Draker in check, right? Yes. The elders will soon hold a meeting to discuss Abel's guardian knight position. Zeke's expression hardened at those words. Unlike ordinary knights, Draker's guardian knights could directly intervene in the clan's operations. This was because the Council of Elders, who presided over the meetings, the Cross Society, which had internal audit rights, and the Guardian Knight Society, which was the executive body, were the main powers that moved the Draker clan, if Abel received the Guardian Knight position. His influence within the clan would undoubtedly increase significantly. Callie looked at Zeke and said, Abel is persuading the elders to obtain the Guardian Knight position at this meeting. Persuasion was just a euphemism. It was no different from lobbying with the Empire's power behind him. Zeke, there's something I want to ask you. She continued slowly. Go to the Dorda Republic and stop the deal between Abel and the Empire. Chapter 89. Zeke looked surprised at Callie's words. A deal between Abel and the Empire? She nodded. Yes, we received intel. It seems Abel is going to make a big deal with the Empire. I don't know exactly what kind of deal it is, but it seems to be related to the card he's going to present to the elders to obtain the Guardian Knight position. After listening to Callie, Zeke asked, Are you sure it's all right to entrust me with such an important mission? Abel is already wary of our faction. If any of us leave, he might cancel the deal immediately, but it's difficult to entrust such an important task to an ordinary knight. Zeke fell into deep thought at Callie's words. If I take on this mission, I'll officially become Callie Draker's person. As the winner of the martial arts tournament, Zeke was scheduled to enter Four Seasons Castle. Four Seasons Castle was the gathering place of all the Draker Blood Alliance clans. It was a place filled with nobles from various kingdoms, lords of clans, and high-ranking politicians from all over the continent to survive in this place. He needed strong connections in that sense. Callie Draker, the first in line to succeed the lordship and with the Guardian Knight position, was more than enough to be a strong shield to protect Zeke. The problem is that Sister Callie will be killed by the Pirate King in a few years. Since he had regressed to the past, there were already many things that were different from his previous life. Considering the circumstances, Zeke decided that he could intervene in the confrontation between Callie and the Pirate King and save her. If Sister Callie stops Abel and safely inherits the lordship, we might be able to prevent the Third Continental War that the Empire is instigating. If that happened, Zeke could focus on training to become the strongest on the continent more stably. The cleanest way was to gain power beyond that of a Black Knight, formally challenge Callie, receive the lordship, and become the absolute ruler. I don't want to rule over Atlas, which will be ruined by the war with the Empire. Zeke finished his contemplation and answered Callie, Okay, sister, I'll take on that mission. Callie was surprised by Zeke's calm acceptance. It wasn't a mission to be accepted lightly, but contrary to her expectations, Zeke gave her an immediate answer. Are you really going to take it? Zeke nodded. Yes. When should I leave? Callie composed herself and said, The deal will take place at a casino in the Dorda Republic in a week. Then it's better to leave quickly, okay? But I have a favor to ask for this mission. What is it? Tell me. I need someone from the Dorda Republic to invite me under the pretense of a winner's tour party for the martial arts tournament. Callie nodded at those words. You mean to hide the mission under the guise of an official invitation? Yes, it will be difficult to enter the casino in the Dorda Republic in secret, and if I make a move as the winner of the martial arts tournament, it will eventually reach Abel's ears anyway. In that case, it would be better to openly receive an invitation and then go to the Dorda Republic. However, since I've rejected all invitations so far, I need an invitation from a key figure in Dorda. Okay, I'll contact Dorda and have them select a suitable person to send an invitation. Thank you, sister. Helen, who was next to them, said to Zeke, Zeke, Dorda may seem glamorous and full of pleasure on the surface, but it's filled with demons inside. You must always be wary of your surroundings. Zeke inwardly chuckled at Helen's words. During his time as a hitman for the Southern Cartel in his past life, Zeke had experience running a casino in the Dorda Republic to launder the McCain cartel's funds. He took over several hotels in the Dorda Republic and ran auction houses and arenas there, laundering the money earned from selling soma. Zeke, who was deeply involved in the underworld, knew better than anyone what Helen's concerns meant. Thank you, Lady Helen, I'll keep that in mind. One more thing. Please speak. Helen said to Zeke, speak comfortably to me as well. Perhaps embarrassed after saying that, Helen blushed slightly. Zeke grinned and nodded. Okay, Sister Helen. Only after hearing his answer did Helen make a satisfied expression. The very next day, an invitation arrived for Zeke from the Dorda Republic. Zeke was surprised when he saw the invitation. The Zayed clan? Oh my God, a direct invitation from the wealthiest clan in the Dorda Republic. The Dorda Republic was famous for its auction houses and casinos, but it was also renowned as a production site for magic stones. The Zayed clan owned the underwater magic stone mines in the Dorda Republic, and 70 of the magic stones supplied to the continent came from this place. To think that they could mobilize the Zayed clan, it showed the immense influence of Kali Draker. Zeke nodded as he looked at the invitation. If it's an invitation from the Zayeds, the other clans I rejected will understand. Just then, Decker approached Zeke. Young master, all the necessary documents for using the portal have been issued. Zeke received the Draker Knight exclusive entry and exit permit that Decker handed him. Thank you, Decker. When did you say I have to go to the terminal? It's operational this evening, so you have to leave soon. The large-scale portal only operated twice a day. Moreover, if he missed tonight's portal to the Dorda Republic, he would have to wait another 3 days. If he was unlucky, it would take longer than going by ship. Thinking about it like that, the system's portal function is really a cheat. Of course, there were various restrictions and it required a large amount of karma points, but being able to move to any desired location at any time was a huge advantage. Zeke marveled at the system once again and moved towards the waiting carriage. When he went outside, Farrell was training Liam and Felix in the garden again. One more time. Farrell was an official knight of the time-honored Thebes kingdom, a candidate for Blue Knight and a direct descendant of the prestigious Achilles clan. As a famous master of traditional swordsmanship, he was perfect for teaching the 2 purple knights. Zeke had specifically asked Farrell to train them. Felix gasped for breath, groaning, "Ugh, Sir Farrell, I think I'm going to die if I do any more." Liam then stepped forward with his sword raised. Felix shuddered at the sight of Liam and wailed, but he followed him. "Ugh. Senior Liam, please stop now." Zeke watched the two and then said to Decker, "Tell Sir Farrell to push Felix a little harder." "Yes, young master." Zeke stared at Decker, who answered politely and then said, "And Decker, reconsider returning as a knight. I need a reliable and talented person." Decker bowed his head and replied, "Thank you for your words, young master, but I'm already too rusty to be called a knight." Far from being rusty, Zeke could see that his skills were still sharp, but Zeke nodded as he looked at Decker, who had once again declined his request. "Okay, but when things get urgent, Decker will have to step up too." "Yes, sir." With that conversation, Zeke bid farewell to Decker and boarded the carriage. Perhaps because Decker had practically raised him since his past life, he couldn't help but act a little spoiled in front of him. By the way, I wonder why he's so stubborn about not being a knight when he seems to have lingering feelings for the sword. Is there something I don't know? Zeke pondered various thoughts in the carriage as he headed towards the terminal. When he arrived at the terminal, someone was waiting for him. "Welcome, master." It was Pei-Nun, dressed in a suit. This was because Zeke had chosen Pei-Nun as his companion for this mission. The two went through the VIP procedure at the terminal and waited in the lounge for a while. "Mr. Pei-Nun, is this your first time in the Dorda Republic?" Pei-Nun shook his head. "I often go to Dorda to obtain items needed for research. This is my first time going through a portal, though." Just then, an announcement came on. "The portal to the Dorda Republic will be opening soon. Passengers, please proceed to the portal shuttle and take your seats." Zeke and Pei-Nun used the passage connected to the lounge and sat in the first-class seats of the portal shuttle. Top-quality leather seats, wine, and various other services were provided. While munching on the peanuts provided, Zeke felt the surrounding magic surge. "Oh, this is interesting." Soon, magic spread through the magic circle surrounding the shuttle, and a large-scale portal opened. The shuttle slowly entered the portal. A slight vibration was felt, and soon, the shuttle stopped and the portal slowly closed. We have arrived in the Dorda Republic. We hope you have a pleasant trip. People started moving busily, and Zeke and Painon also got off the shuttle and exited the terminal. Stepping out of the terminal, Zeke saw an incredibly luxurious carriage prepared for him. It was a golden carriage pulled by 6 twin-humped camels adorned with various ornaments. Zeke's expression darkened at the sight of the carriage. No way. Sir Zeke Draker? Just then, a typical Dorton man, wearing a turban and white clothes with all sorts of ornaments made of expensive magic stones dangling from him, approached Zeke. He recognized Zeke and embraced him. Welcome. Welcome. His continental common tongue was quite natural. Zeke replied in Dorton, thank you for your hospitality. The Dorton man was surprised that Zeke spoke Dorton. Oh my. You speak Dorton. The god of earth will bless you, Sir Zeke. He prayed loudly and led Zeke inside the golden carriage. Only after sitting in the carriage did the Dorton man introduce himself. I apologize for the late introduction. My name is Muhammad bin Abu de Zayed, the second son of the Zayed clan. Zeke was surprised. He had guessed as much from the luxurious carriage, but he didn't expect a direct descendant of the Zayed clan to come and welcome him personally. Muhammad looked at Zeke and said, first of all, congratulations on winning the Draker Martial Arts Tournament. It is an honor for our clan that you, the winner, Sir Zeke, have accepted the invitation of the Zayed clan. Everyone on the continent knows the shining reputation of the Zayed clan. As expected of Sir Zeke, you are an honorable knight. I, Muhammad, am deeply moved. After the formal greetings, Muhammad's expression suddenly changed. I've heard from Kali Draker. Zeke also straightened his posture at those words. Then I don't need to make a long speech. It would be great if you could arrange a casino where the deal will take place in advance, Mr. Muhammad. Muhammad smiled and shook his hand. Sir Zeke, with all due respect, there's no need for that. What do you mean? Muhammad said with a slight smile. No casino in the Dorda Republic can escape the influence of the Zayed clan. Zeke understood Muhammad's words to some extent. Well, even when I was running a casino during my cartel days, I had a lot of trouble because of them, because those who were instructed by the Zayeds attacked us so often. In fact, this was the reason why Don Juan sent Zeke to the casino in Dorda after Zeke was deployed and killed those who attacked them one after another, hanging their bodies in front of the Zayed mansion. They finally proposed a truce. Considering the Zayed clan was richer than the emperor of the empire in terms of wealth, he could understand why they showed such confidence. Zeke said to Muhammad, all right, Mr. Painon here is an excellent mage. He will place a wiretapping spell on the meeting place where the empire's side will be. Zeke hadn't brought Painon for nothing. He wanted to obtain evidence that Abel was trying to break the Draker clan's neutrality pledge by making a deal with the Empire. To do this, he planned to install a wiretapping device in advance and leave it as evidence. Muhammad smiled, revealing his white teeth. That's not a problem at all, don't worry. And I have one more favor to ask. What is it? Just say the word. Zeke whispered to Muhammad in a low voice. Muhammad was surprised to hear Zeke's request. That's. Please. Muhammad made a slightly troubled expression, but then nodded. Okay, since it's your request, Sir Zeke, I'll do my best. Thank you, Mr. Muhammad. Zeke turned his head and looked out the carriage window. The luxurious carriage was passing through the road laid out in the wasteland of the Dorda Republic and entering the glamorous city. The dazzling lights of Dorda, known as the city without night, were overflowing. Zeke sharpened his mind as he looked at the splendid scenery. Chapter 90. The Altara Casino, where Muhammad led them, was famous for being the largest and most luxurious casino in the Dorda Republic. Zeke and Painon were guided to a suite room in the Altara Casino Hotel. Sir Zeke, please make yourself at home and use it comfortably, Muhammad said with a smile. Then he whispered to Zeke, I've also taken care of what you mentioned earlier, Sir Zeke. Zeke expressed his gratitude to Muhammad. The next morning, someone came up to Zeke's room. It was none other than the Black Yiksha, who had crossed over from the south to the Dorda Republic. What Zeke had asked Muhammad was to allow the Black Yiksha, who was currently unidentified, into the Altara Casino. Despite the strict identification requirements of a top-tier casino, Muhammad made a special exception for Zeke's request. The Black Yiksha greeted Zeke and said, It's been a while, Black Yiksha. No, I should call you Boris now. How are you finding the South? Zeke called the Black Yiksha by his new identity's name. Boris replied with a haggard face, It's fine. He seemed to be having a harder time under Simon than when he was a public enemy of the continent in Delphoa. Zeke said to Boris, You're roughly aware of the situation, right? Boris nodded. Yes, I heard there will be a deal between the Empire and Abel Draker. Yes, has there been a deal of this scale before? Boris shook his head. Not that I know of. Zeke's eyes changed. That means the relationship between Abel Draker and the Empire is unusual. It's more than that. Even allied nations rarely make deals like this. It was surprising that the Empire, which rarely made deals even between nations, was making such a big deal with an individual like Abel Draker. Not only Abel, but Siemens must also be involved in some way. Zeke was still concerned about Kane having both the Siemens surname and the name of the Imperial clan. Does the Siemens clan have separate connections with the Imperial clan? I'm not sure about the Imperial clan, but I know there are quite a few joint ventures between Siemens and the Empire. Zeke explained the operation plan to Boris. There will be a celebratory banquet at the casino starting tomorrow. You attend the banquet and blend in, and if you see anyone from the Empire, keep an eye on them. Okay. After Boris joined, Zeke began the operation in earnest. Paynon and Boris installed wiretapping magic circles throughout the casino. It took a lot of time to install them with double and triple security measures so that the Imperial mages wouldn't discover them, and starting the next day, a luxurious banquet hosted by the Zayed clan was held at the casino. Thump, 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 thump. Muhammad knew how to have fun. He rented out the entire club in the basement of the hotel and invited all the young wealthy people in the Dorda Republic. Zeke, as the main character of the banquet, mingled with them, drinking and having fun. Although he pretended to be drunk, he wasn't drunk at all thanks to his healing factor. While dealing with the children of influential clans in the Dorda Republic who wanted to get close to him, Zeke kept an eye on the movements of Abel and the Empire. It was the second day since the banquet began. Master, the Imperial Intelligence Agency Special Forces have appeared. Zeke, hearing Boris's report through communication magic, tensed up and looked around. Using his dragon eye, he could clearly see a few people who were different from the others. The Imperial Special Forces were elite agents who had undergone special training in the intelligence agency. The fact that the Special Forces have appeared means that the Empire's consuls are involved. The consuls were the real power behind the Empire, directly moving it under the Emperor. The Imperial Special Forces only moved under the orders of these consuls. This might be a bigger deal than I thought. Zeke pretended not to care about the Special Forces and continued to laugh, chat, and drink with the young wealthy people. I hear Zeke Draker is down there. William said to Abel. Abel looked at William and said, "Do you think he came because of our deal?" William shook his head. I heard he was invited by the Zayed clan. It's plausible since he's the winner of the martial arts tournament. Abel sat down in front of William and said, "The Zayed clan? Zeke doesn't have the power to mobilize that clan. Callie might be able to, though." William was surprised at those words. No way? Even so, it's the Zayed clan. Even Callie Draker can't handle them so easily. Abel glared at William and said, "William, as I always say, you lack imagination. That's why you can't deal with Callie Draker." William closed his mouth at Abel's words. Abel tapped the desk and asked, "Is it possible to change the meeting place?" William made a troubled expression. If we suddenly change the meeting place? It will offend the Empire. It might make us look unprepared. Abel wanted to move the meeting place to another location, but as William said, considering the Empire's disposition, it was likely to cause a negative reaction. Moreover, the other party in this deal was none other than Julius, one of the most powerful consuls in the Empire. It's not easy dealing with that stubborn old man. As Abel made a troubled face, William looked at his watch and said, "There's not much time left before the consul arrives. It's practically impossible to change the meeting place now." Abel nodded at William's words. "We'll proceed with the meeting as scheduled, but deploy more guards around the area and tell the mages to thoroughly check for wiretapping devices." Abel felt an unusual sense of anxiety. As William said, it wasn't strange for the winner of the martial arts tournament to be here, but the fact that Zeke was at the casino at this time made him feel uneasy. It's hard to see it as a mere coincidence. Just then, the consul has arrived. The consul's arrival was earlier than expected. Abel and William went down to the conference room they had prepared in advance. As they waited, Julius entered, escorted by the special forces. Julius, dressed in the Empire's characteristic attire, was an old man with a hooked nose and a sharp expression. Despite his age, he had a large build and exuded an aura of dignity. Abel admired Julius, as expected of the Empire's war hero. Julius wasn't a black knight, but he was a great general of the empire with excellent tactics and leadership. At the same time, he was known as the only person who could currently control the emperor in the empire. Julius approached Abel and offered his hand for a handshake. Nice to meet you. It's an honor to meet the Lion Sword of Draco in person. Abel also shook Julius's hand and greeted him. I've heard a lot about your reputation, Consul. It's an honor to meet a hero. After exchanging pleasantries, the two sat down. As soon as he sat down, Julius immediately brought up the main topic. I believe the Lion's Sword is well aware of the situation. Concerns about Karuz are growing. Abel nodded at those words. I'm well aware. Although I have a deep friendship with Prince Karuz, I believe it's time to make a big decision for the sake of the Empire's safety and future. Zeke, who was enjoying the banquet, signaled to Muhammad. Muhammad pretended to be completely drunk and dragged Zeke into the VVP room. There was a separate secret passage in the VVP room, allowing them to go up to the guest room without being noticed. This should be enough of an alibi to avoid Abel's suspicion. Zeke, who came up to the room through the secret passage, listened to the wiretapping device with pain on. Zeke's expression gradually hardened as he listened to the contents of the deal. The Consul and Abel were talking about the complex power relations within the Empire. It was about the matter of electing the next emperor after the current emperor died. And it seemed to be a problem because the votes for the first and second in line to the throne weren't much different. Moreover, there were concerns that the votes for the second prince, whom Julius supported, would be divided with Karuz. In the end, Karuz was a troublesome existence for Julius and the other supporters of the second prince. The problem was that Karuz had the most legitimacy among all the princes. If they directly intervened to deal with Karuz, it could lead to internal conflict within the empire, so Julius decided to take the risk and meet with Abel to make a deal. Painon looked at Zeke with a hardened expression and said, Master, this is no ordinary matter. Zeke put his finger to his lips, signaling Painon to stop talking. This is bigger than I expected. It was a matter that the Consul himself had come forward for. From the Empire's side, the Consul was offering Abel resources to persuade the Draco elders in exchange for taking care of an imperial prince. If this were revealed, it would surely cause a huge scandal. Zeke quickly asked Boris, did Prince Karuz come here as well? Boris replied, I'm not sure if it's the prince, but there is a place heavily guarded by the special forces. Zeke recalled the Third Continental War from his previous life. Certainly, Karuz didn't die and led the battlefield alongside Abel. In his previous life, he thought Karuz was a man driven mad by bloodlust, but seeing this situation, he wondered if Karuz might have been brainwashed after being taken to Abel and Seaman's side. He said to Painon, Mr. Painon, take these records to Muhammad right now and go to Iason. I'll ask the Agamemnons for an escort. This record must be delivered directly to Kali Draker. Okay, aren't you coming with me, Master? I'll take Prince Karuz with me. Painon's face hardened at Zeke's words. He sensed that this could escalate into an incident that would shake the entire continent. Please be careful. After Painon left, Zeke contacted the Agamemnons. Then he stored Bahamut in his inventory and took out other swords and daggers. He put on a mask and exited through the hotel window. Whoosh. Using the power of wind to climb down the hotel wall, Zeke used his dragon eye to find where Prince Karuz might be. He found a VIP room where a large number of people presumed to be special forces were gathered. That seems to be the place. Zeke went up to where the VIP room was and entered through the window. Then he used the concealment skill he obtained when he captured the Gaguk. Just as the Gaguk blended into the darkness and hid its form, Zeke's body melted into the darkness. It's a good thing I devoured the Gaguk back then. Zeke, clinging to the ceiling and concealed, passed the special forces and entered the room. Soon, he could hear a loud voice from inside the room. You insolent fools! Get out of my way! Karuz shouted at the special forces. Despite this, the special forces agents were blocking Karuz from leaving. Karuz gritted his teeth and threw things in the room at the special forces agents. How dare you stop me? Get out of my way! Can't you hear the call of the casino? He was throwing a tantrum because he wanted to go to the casino and gamble. Zeke looked around the structure of the room. I don't see an escape route. He didn't know when the deal between Abel and the Imperial Consul would end. This was the only chance to escape with Karuz. Zeke took a deep breath and he waited for the enraged Karuz to come further inside the room. You rude fools! As soon as we return to the Empire. Whoosh! Zeke, descending from the ceiling, snatched Karuz. Then he drew his sword, imbued it with strength, and struck the wall. Crash! A large hole was blasted into the hotel wall. Zeke jumped through the hole with Karuz in his arms. Kayak. Karuz, tucked under Zeke's arm, screamed, whoosh. Zeke, using the power of wind to slow their descent, landed in the hotel garden. Boris. Detonate the smoke bombs in the casino and get out. Following his command, Boris activated the smoke bomb scrolls he had installed in advance. Whoosh. Not only the casino but the entire hotel was filled with smoke. Fire. Fire. Others, thinking there was a fire, panicked and tried to escape outside. Thanks to this, the special forces were also blocked by the crowd and couldn't easily get outside. Zeke, wearing a mask, held Karuz. Who are you? Your Highness, listen carefully. Julius and Abel are trying to kill you right now, Karuz said in surprise. What do you mean? Julius is my loyal subject and Abel is my friend. If that's true, Your Highness, why would the special forces be forcibly holding you? Karuz's face hardened at Zeke's words. He, too, had felt something strange since arriving in Dorda. He felt more like he was being held captive to prevent him from escaping rather than being protected. Could it be that Julius and Abel really? Zeke said to Karuz in an urgent voice, if you stay here, you'll surely be killed or brainwashed. We need to move to a safe place, so follow me. Karuz still had an expression of disbelief, but he decided to follow Zeke for now. Just then, Boris came outside. Riding a horse, boss. We need to get out of here now. As Zeke and Boris joined forces and were about to leave the hotel, knights who had been waiting outside rushed towards Zeke. They were none other than Abel's knights.